$2. That is all Valentina Morgan has. $2 crumpled in the pocket of her hotel-made uniform, still damp from November rain, as she stands in the underground poker room where cigar smoke hangs so thick it coats her lungs like poison. Green felt tables stretch across the dim space under amber lights that flicker like dying stars. Armed guards stand at every door, their eyes tracking her the way predators track wounded prey. She should not be here. A woman like her does not walk into Alessandro Ferraro's private world uninvited. But desperation makes people do impossible things. Alessandro Ferraro sits motionless at the head table, a man carved from stone and cold calculation. 53 years old, 6'1", built broad across the shoulders with the kind of physical presence that makes rooms shrink. His dark hair is silvered at the temples. A scar runs from his left eye to his cheekbone, thin as a blade, white as bone. He wears a charcoal suit that costs more than Valentina earns in 3 months, the jacket hanging open to reveal a white silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar. A gold Patek Philippe watch catches the light on his wrist. But his eyes, those storm grey eyes that have made grown men confess their sins without being asked, are hollowed out. Empty. Destroyed. His son Marco lies 3 floors above them. 16 years old. The ambush meant for Alessandro instead shattered the boy's spine. The doctors at New York Presbyterian spoke the words that should not be spoken to a man like him: never walk again. Permanent paralysis. The rest of his life in a wheelchair. And Alessandro Ferraro, the most feared mafia boss in the city, watched his boy's future collapse and could do absolutely nothing. Vinny leans toward him, all muscle and scar tissue, wearing a black suit and the expression of a man who has killed before breakfast. "Boss, there's a woman at the door asking to speak with you. Says it's urgent. Says it's about Marco." His voice sounds like gravel being crushed. Theo, the other lieutenant, younger, sharper, with cold intelligence burning behind his eyes, tenses. "Could be a move against you. Could be an ambush." Alessandro does not respond. He simply raises one hand, and both men fall silent. That is all it takes. One hand. One gesture. That is the language of absolute power. Valentina is brought through the door by 2 guards who hold her by the elbows like she is a criminal. She is not a criminal. She is a ghost. A woman who disappeared into invisibility somewhere between her husband's funeral and the day the hospital sent their 3rd final notice. She is 29 years old but looks 40. Her dark brown hair is pulled back so tightly her scalp aches. Her eyes are brown, the left one swollen completely shut, bruised in shades of purple and black that tell a story no one should have to tell. Her neck bears handprint bruises, 5 fingers on the left side, a thumb on the right. The hotel-made uniform hangs on her frame like a costume on a scarecrow. Her calloused hands shake slightly as she walks. She wears her mother's prayer card on a string around her neck. The card is worn, the edges soft from being touched 1,000 times. It shows a Saint Valentina has never understood but always believed in anyway. When she stops before Alessandro Ferraro, the entire room holds its breath. She speaks. Her voice trembles like a candle in the wind, barely a whisper, but her words come out steady. "My name is Valentina Morgan. I know who you are. I know you don't let people like me walk into rooms like this. But your son is dying, and I can help him." Vinny reaches for his weapon. The sound of the safety clicking off echoes across the poker room like a gunshot in a cathedral. Alessandro raises his hand again. "Let her speak." The words fall like stones into still water. Valentina takes a breath. "I was a physical therapist. Before my husband died. Before I lost my license, before I lost our house, before I lost everything. I've studied cases like your son's. Spinal injuries. Paralysis. The doctors are wrong about what's permanent and what's possible. Your son, he's young. His nervous system is still plastic. Still capable of rewiring itself. I've seen it happen. I know how to make it happen. Why should I believe you?" Alessandro's voice is deep and solid like an oath. Like the voice of God if God wore a $5,000 suit and carried the weight of his own devastation behind his eyes. Because I have nothing to lie about, Valentina says. I have $2 in my pocket. My daughter Ava is 7 years old. In 12 days, I lose custody of her. The bank that holds my husband's debts is taking her from me unless I find $22,000. $22,000. I have two. So either you believe me and I help your son and maybe the universe gives back something I lost. Or you shoot me and I die broken and my daughter grows up in foster care. Neither of those things matters except that I know your son doesn't have to spend the rest of his life in that chair. That part matters. The silence that follows is the kind that has weight. Alessandro stands slowly. He is taller than she realized. When he moves, each step is controlled, deliberate, like a general surveying a battlefield. He walks to where Valentina stands and circles her, studying her the way a jeweler examines a stone. His men watch him with expressions she cannot read. Show me your hands, he says. She does. Her palms are calloused. Her nails are short and clean. The skin on her knuckles is rough from cleaning chemicals. These are not the hands of a liar. What happened to your eye? My manager at the hotel. Douglas Hale. He steals my tips. Forces me to work 12-hour shifts without breaks. When I told him I was going to report him to the owner, he put his hands on my throat. She touches her neck where the bruises bloom like dark flowers. This is what happens when nobody cares enough to stop him. Something cold and dangerous stirs in Alessandro's chest. In 15 years of ruling this city, he has learned that pain recognizes pain. Cruelty recognizes cruelty. And invisible people the world overlooks, discards, leaves bleeding, they see each other across any distance. He has been invisible before. Before he became powerful. Before his brother betrayed him and he learned that mercy was a luxury only the wealthy could afford. He speaks to Vinnie without looking away from her. Bring in the medical files on Marco. All of them. From every doctor who examined him. Boss? Vinnie looks confused. Do it. The manila folders arrive within minutes. Alessandro spreads them across one of the poker tables, and Valentina moves forward. Her hand stops shaking. She forgets about the $2 in her pocket. She forgets about Douglas Hale and Victoria Ashford and the foreclosure notice that arrived this morning like a death sentence. She forgets that she is standing in a room with 13 armed men and a mafia boss who could have her disappeared before the sun rises. She reads. And as she reads, her damaged face transforms. Hope flickers across her features like a candle being lit in the dark. This nerve bundle here, she points to a diagram with one trembling finger. It's not severed. It's compressed. You see? The swelling hasn't gone down because they've had him immobilized. But if we start mobilization therapy, specific patterns, precise angles, consistent pressure over weeks, this nerve can rewire itself. The plasticity in young spinal cords, it's more resilient than your doctors think. Can you prove that? Alessandro's voice is quiet. Dangerous. I can show you. She pulls out her own phone, an old Android with a cracked screen. She searches for research papers. She shows him studies. She walks him through the science like she is teaching a student, not speaking to the most powerful criminal in New York. And something in the way she explains, something in the certainty of her voice, makes Theo and Vinnie exchange a look neither has seen in 15 years. Their boss believes her. At 3:56 in the morning, Valentina Morgan walks out of Alessandro Ferraro's underground poker room with a piece of paper in her hand. The paper contains an address. It is the address of a penthouse on the Upper West Side. It contains a name, Dr. Marcus Chen, the world's foremost specialist in spinal cord regeneration therapy, a man Alessandro has kept on retainer for 5 years. It contains 4 words written in thick black ink, help her save him. And beneath that, in smaller letters, whatever you need. Ask. The November rain falls heavy as she walks to her car, a 2003 Honda Civic that is dying slowly, held together by prayer and duct tape. She does not know that in 12 days, everything is about to change. She does not know that the prayer card around her neck has already been answered, that the universe has already heard her, that impossibility is about to become her address. All she knows is that for the first time in 847 days, since the day her husband died, she can breathe. $2. That is all Valentina Morgan has in her pocket. $2.47 if you count the coins at the bottom of her work bag, the one she found wedged between lint and a broken hair clip. $2.47 to feed herself and her 7-year-old daughter Ava for the next 4 days until the hotel pays her again. $2 to stop the electricity from being shut off. $2 to become invisible, because that is what poverty teaches you, how to disappear into the margins of other people's lives. But the electricity bill is not the crisis. The crisis is the number written in thick black ink on the notice taped to her apartment door, $22,000. Exactly $22,000 owed to the creditors of her late husband's failed construction company. 12 days remain before those creditors petition the family court to strip her of custody. 12 days before a judge signs a paper that removes Ava from her arms and places her in the hands of foster care while the state auctions off her daughter's future to settle debts Valentina never incurred. She has counted the number 17 times. The math never changes. 17 times she has sat at the wobbly kitchen table with a pen and a notebook, watching the numbers blur through her tears, and the answer remains the same: impossible. The apartment is so small that Valentina can hear Ava breathing from the bedroom. 400 square feet. Peeling paint the color of old bruises. A window that looks out onto an alley where pigeons fight over scraps. This is what 8 months of her late husband's death has brought her: not grief, not time to process the loss, but velocity downward, a free fall with no net below. The hotel work begins at 5:30 in the morning. Valentina's alarm is her phone's low battery warning, vibrating against the nightstand at 4:24 a.m. She has never been able to afford a proper alarm clock. The phone is cracked across the screen, held together with a case that costs less than a coffee. She moves through the darkness without turning on lights. Every penny of electricity is counted, rationed, mourned. By 5:15, she is on the subway heading downtown, her work uniform folded in her bag. The morning air in the station smells like old metal and human desperation. An old man sleeps on a bench, one arm wrapped around a shopping cart of possessions. Valentina looks away. She cannot afford to see herself in him yet. Not for 12 more days. After 12 days, perhaps. But not now. The Ashford Hotel glitters on Fifth Avenue like a middle finger raised at the sky. 68 stories of marble and imported Italian tile and crystal chandeliers that cost more than Valentina earned in a month. The lobby sprawls across an entire city block, with a black and white checkered floor and floor-to-ceiling windows that frame Central Park like a painting in a wealthy man's study. Guests drift through like angels in expensive clothing, leaving trails of perfume and privilege. Valentina enters through the service entrance. The break room is a converted closet in the basement. Grey concrete walls. A refrigerator that hums a dying sound. A folding chair that is missing one foot and leans permanently to the left. 8 women sit crowded into the space, all wearing the same housekeeping uniform, blue polyester that pills and stains, a logo stitched across the chest in white thread. Valentina changes into her uniform. The fabric is cold against her skin. She pins her dark hair back, every strand accounted for, every piece of herself contained and minimized so that she disappears into the role she plays. Housekeeping. Invisible. Replaceable. The supervisor assigns her the penthouse wing. 32 rooms. Standard cleaning protocol: sweep, dust, sanitize, replace towels, turn down beds. 8 hours of work compressed into 5 hours because the hotel is overbooked. A man and woman check out of Suite 3421 at 7 in the morning without using the bathroom. Valentina finds their half-empty coffee cups, lipstick stains on white porcelain, a used condom on the nightstand. She cleans it without flinching. This is her job. This is what happens when you own nothing. You touch the detritus of other people's lives and you smile while doing it. By 11 in the morning, she has cleaned 14 rooms. Her hands are raw. The cleaning solution has burned the skin between her fingers. Her back aches in a way that is becoming permanent, a dull throb that she carries even when she is sitting still. She is eating the leftover toast from a guest's breakfast plate, the one that was cleared from the room, the one she found in the hallway outside Suite 3401. No one is watching. No one cares. She bites into it quickly, ashamed even though there is no one there to see her shame. That is when Douglas Hale finds her. He appears at the end of the hallway like a minor god descended from executive heaven. 54 years old, balding across the crown, the remaining hair dyed an unconvincing shade of brown. His cologne arrives before his body does, something expensive and cloying, a fragrance that smells like money trying too hard. He wears a charcoal suit that fits him well across the chest and buttons too tightly around the waist. A manager's badge hangs from a lanyard around his neck. On his left hand, a gold wedding band and a pinky ring studded with what might be diamonds or might be costume jewelry purchased to look like diamonds. "Morgan," he says. His voice is flat and authoritative, the voice of a man who has learned to speak in commands. "I need to talk to you." He walks past her without waiting for a response. She follows because she has no choice. Hotel policy. He is management. She is housekeeping. The hierarchy is as immutable as gravity. The supply closet is at the end of the hallway. Shelves stacked with fresh linens, cleaning supplies in industrial bottles, the smell of bleach and starch. Douglas steps inside and holds the door partially closed. The light is a single bare bulb that flickers with electrical uncertainty. Shadows pool in the corners. The tips from the penthouse suite, he begins, not looking at her directly. Hotel policy requires all tips to be collected by management and redistributed according to departmental needs. You understand that, yes? Valentina's throat goes tight. The tips. The only money that keeps her ahead of starvation. Guests leaving $5, $10, $20 on the nightstand. Money she has been carefully gathering in a manila envelope beneath her mattress. She has not told anyone about that money. The manila envelope contains hope. It contains the possibility that she might survive this. "Yes," she whispers. "Good." He finally looks at her. His eyes are pale blue, the color of ice that has been left out too long and started to turn opaque. "And you are staying 3 hours past your shift. Today and going forward. Turn down service. The evening shift has called in sick. I need someone to cover. You will cover. This is unpaid, naturally, because you are already receiving your regular wages for your regular hours. Hotel policy again. I have to pick up my daughter," Valentina says. The words come out small and shattered. Her after-school program ends at, "I do not care about your personal arrangements." His voice does not raise. It becomes quieter instead, which is far more dangerous. "Your personal arrangements are not my concern. My concern is the operation of this hotel. Your concern should be the security of your employment. Do you understand me? Because I could very easily find someone else who understands hotel policy. There are 17 people standing in line for your job right now." 17. She nods. She understands. The message is clear. Comply or be replaced. Comply or lose the only income source separating her from homelessness. "And Morgan," he continues, moving closer. Close enough that she can smell the coffee on his breath beneath the cologne. "If you ever speak about internal hotel matters to anyone, to other staff, to guests, to anyone, I will have you removed and blacklisted from every hotel in Manhattan. I have that power. You have no power. You understand the imbalance here." Her hand moves without her permission. It reaches for the door frame. Something in her body is trying to escape. Douglas notices the movement. He reaches out and grabs her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise immediately, but hard enough to communicate intent. Hard enough to say, I can hurt you. Hard enough to say, no one will help you. Do not touch me, she says. Her voice is not her own. It is borrowed from some resource she did not know she possessed. He releases her wrist. A smile crosses his face. It is not a kind smile. It is the smile of someone who has just learned that the person in front of him is too desperate to actually fight back. Tonight, he says. 6 p.m. Room turn-down, start on the 42nd floor and work downward. You will finish at 9. Then you will leave. You will not speak about this conversation. You will not make complaints to HR. You understand. She leaves the supply closet without answering. Her wrist throbs where his fingers pressed. Tomorrow there will be a mark there. She has become intimately familiar with the geography of her own bruising. The afternoon shift brings new guests. A businessman checking in alone. A family of 4 with children who run through the hallway shrieking with the freedom of inherited privilege. An elderly couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. Valentina cleans around them, through them, becoming less than furniture in their landscape. She takes the 5 p.m. subway home instead of the 4 p.m. because Douglas will not let her leave early. She is 35 minutes late picking up Ava. The after-school program is run out of a church basement on 42nd Street. The director, a woman named Ms. Chen, sits on a plastic chair with Ava beside her, reading from a picture book. When Valentina arrives, Ava does not run to her with joy. Ava looks up with the expression of a child who has learned not to expect arrival, only disappointment delayed. I am sorry, Valentina says. The apology is automatic now. She says it so many times that it has become her native language. Work kept me. I am so sorry. It happens, Ms. Chen says kindly. Too kindly. It is the kindness of pity. We were just reading about a princess who had to leave her kingdom. Ava was worried about what would happen to her. Valentina takes her daughter's hand. It is so small. The fingers are so thin that she can feel each individual bone. When did Ava become this fragile? This used to being afraid? They walk home in the November cold. The wind blows up from the street grates, carrying with it the smell of roasted pretzels and car exhaust and the ghost of summer. Ava walks beside her, not speaking. She has learned to be silent. Children learn this quickly, that noise disturbs the adults around them. That taking up space is a luxury. At home, Valentina cooks dinner from what remains: rice, canned beans, a half onion that has started to soften. It fills a bowl but not a hunger. Ava eats slowly, methodically, making the food last as long as possible. She knows, on some cellular level, that food is measured and rationed in their house. She knows without being told that abundance is not coming. After dinner, Valentina helps with homework. Math problems about trains and distances. A reading assignment about a girl who finds a magical door. Ava reads slowly, sounding out words, her tongue clicking against the roof of her mouth as she forms each syllable. She is 7 years old and she is trying so hard to be perfect, as if perfect behavior might change the trajectory they are on. By 8 o'clock, Ava is asleep. She lies on her side, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, her breathing steady and deep. This is the only time Valentina can breathe, in these hours after her daughter sleeps and before her own collapse into exhaustion. She sits at the kitchen table with the manila envelope. She counts the tips again. $237. It is not enough. It has never been enough and it will never be enough. She needs $22,000 in 11 days now. The hours are passing. The deadline is becoming visible on the horizon like a wave that cannot be outrun. She takes out her phone and opens the email from the loan officer at the bank. The message is dated 6 weeks ago. Ms. Morgan, I regret to inform you that your application for a personal loan has been denied. Your credit score, based on the financial obligations inherited from your late husband's estate, does not meet our lending criteria. We recommend consulting with a financial advisor regarding debt restructuring options. Sincerely, Michael Torres, Senior Loan Officer. She has applied to 4 other banks. The responses are identical. The word no, stamped across her future in a dozen different fonts. At midnight, Valentina lies in bed beside her sleeping daughter and holds the worn prayer card that hangs around her neck. It is small, laminated, the corners soft from being held 1,000 times. On one side is an image of St. Jude, the saint of impossible things. On the other side, handwritten in her mother's shaky script from 30 years ago, when everything else fails, you still have faith. Her mother has been dead for 6 years. The prayer card is the only part of her that remains. Valentina presses it against her chest and whispers into the darkness, "Help me. Please. I do not know how to do this alone." The city outside her window does not answer. The city never answers. The city only takes. The rain fell like needles against the windshield of the 1997 Honda Civic, relentless, cold, hammering in rhythm with Valentina Morgan's heartbeat. 2 in the morning on a November highway, and the world had narrowed to headlights and darkness and the sound of an engine dying. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, coasting toward the shoulder, smoke rising from under the hood like a ghost escaping. In the backseat, wrapped in a coat too thin for this weather, Ava slept with her thumb in her mouth, trusting her mother to keep her safe. Valentina had $47 in her purse. She needed $22,000. In her pocket, $2. That was all. Everything else had been spent on rent, on Ava's school fees, on the monthly payments to creditors who called her name like a curse. She turned off the engine. The silence that followed felt like drowning. She wrapped her own coat around Ava without waking her, felt the child's cold skin through the thin fabric, and stepped into the November night. The rain soaked through her hotel uniform instantly, the polyester clinging to her ribs. Her left eye throbbed where Douglas Hale had backhanded her earlier that shift, her vision blurred on that side. Purple handprint bruises wrapped around her throat like a necklace of shame, marks from where he'd shoved her against the steel shelf in the service hallway when she'd whispered that she was going to report him. Report him to whom? To Victoria Ashford, the hotel's executive, who had smiled while watching Douglas humiliate her in front of guests. To the police, who never came to places like this. She stood in the rain, 11 days left before the custody hearing, and felt the enormity of it pressing down like the sky itself. Headlights appeared through the darkness, red eyes approaching from a distance. Then another set. Then another. 3 black SUVs, windows tinted so dark they looked like closed eyes, moving in formation down the empty highway like sharks cutting through water. They slowed. Stopped. The world held its breath. The rear door of the middle SUV opened, and Alessandro Ferraro stepped out into the rain without flinching. He was tall, his shoulders broad beneath a long black coat made of wool that cost more than Valentina's monthly rent. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that had seen too much death. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone like a knife's memory. His eyes were storm gray and penetrating, the kind that had learned to read fear in a person's heartbeat. Behind him came Vinny and Theo, their hands instinctively near concealed weapons, their eyes scanning for threats in the empty night. Alessandro saw her standing there, stumbling, bleeding from a cut on her forehead, one eye swollen shut, terror and defiance warring in the single good eye she could open. He saw her protecting her daughter behind her like a shield made of bone and will. Something moved in his chest, something he had learned to lock away years ago. She reminded him of someone. His younger brother, maybe, before the betrayal, before Alessandro had learned that mercy was weakness and compassion was just another word for suicide. "You need help," Alessandro said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, steady as granite. Valentina's hands trembled. She pulled Ava closer, felt the child stir but not wake. "I need $22,000 in 12 days and a miracle," she said, her voice barely a whisper, shattered like glass. "Unless you're offering that, I'll walk." Theo laughed, a sound like breaking bottles. Alessandro silenced him with a single look, a movement so small it was almost invisible. "The rain is not stopping," Alessandro said. Neither are the trucks on this highway at 2 in the morning. Get in the car. Both of you. She hesitated, every instinct screaming danger. This man was power concentrated in human form. She could see it in how his men positioned themselves around him, in how the very air seemed to shift when he moved. But Ava was shivering. Valentina could feel her daughter's small body vibrating with cold. She climbed into the back of the SUV, pulling Ava against her chest, and the door closed with a sound like a coffin ceiling. What Valentina did not know, could not have known, was that this man had already made a phone call that night. She did not know that Alessandro Ferraro controlled half of New York's underworld, that blood stained his hands in quantities that would never wash clean, that saving her from the rain was the first kind thing he had done in 8 years. She did not know that in the back of this car, her life was being rewritten by a man who had forgotten how to hope until he saw desperation in a single good eye. The SUVs moved through rain-slicked streets toward a neighborhood where police cars rarely patrolled and the buildings rose like fortresses. They stopped at a brownstone with limestone columns and no visible sign. Inside, marble floors that reflected chandelier light, oil paintings of men whose faces no longer mattered, armed men standing at every corner like statues carved from shadow. Valentina held Ava close, both of them soaked, both shivering. Alessandro led them upstairs to a guest room where a fireplace already burned with real flame, where towels had been laid out in advance, where children's clothes in Ava's exact size hung in the closet. His men must have prepared this room hours before he stopped on that highway, but Alessandro did not explain. An hour later, Ava slept in the next room, and Valentina sat at a table with coffee warming her hands. The heat felt foreign, like something from another life. Alessandro sat across from her, his coat discarded, his white shirt open at the collar. Vinny and Theo stood behind him like carved saints. "Why did you stop?" Valentina asked. Alessandro studied her face, the bruises, the swollen eye, the marks on her throat. "Who did that to you? Why do you care?" She met his eyes despite her fear. Despite everything, she did not look away. He leaned forward, and his lieutenants exchanged a look neither had seen in 15 years. "Because I have seen that look before. Desperation with nowhere left to go." "What do you need $22,000 for?" She told him. She explained about her husband's death 8 months ago, about the creditors, about the custody hearing that would steal Ava away and give her to people who saw her as a future bargaining chip. She repeated the number like a prayer that had stopped working, 22,000. "I have two. I need 22,000 in 12 days. "And what will you do for this money?" Alessandro asked. "Anything legal." Valentina straightened despite her injuries, and something flickered in Alessandro's expression. "I will work. I will clean. I was a physical therapist before my husband's illness. I stopped when the debts," her voice caught. "My son," Alessandro interrupted. 16 years old. Spine injury. Paralyzed from the waist down. The doctors said it was permanent. Incurable. For 6 months, my son has been dying in pieces while still breathing." He paused, and the silence in the room became a living thing. "If you can help him walk again, I will give you $50,000. Valentina felt the world tilt. "I can't promise miracles," she said carefully. "I need to assess the injury first." "You are already here," Alessandro said. "That is more than anyone else offered." The next morning, she met Marco in a room on the 3rd floor. He was 16, dark-haired like his father, with Alessandro's storm-gray eyes burning with rage. He sat in a wheelchair covered with a lap blanket, and around the room lay evidence of his fury: a shattered lamp, a book with pages torn from its spine, a water glass that had been hurled hard enough to leave a dent in the wall. When Valentina entered, he threw a pen at her without looking. It missed by a foot. "Get out," Marco said. She did not flinch. She pulled a chair close and sat at his eye level, her own swollen eye meeting his. "I lost my husband 8 months ago," she said quietly. "I have a daughter who will be taken from me in 11 days. I have one swollen eye and bruises on my throat from a man who steals my wages. So your anger? I understand it. But I am not leaving until you let me try. Something shifted in Marco's face. The rage did not disappear, but it paused. He stopped throwing things. She assessed him gently, her hands knowing exactly where to press, where to test, where the problem lived in his spinal cord. Nerve response. The doctors had missed it. She felt it flutter under her fingertips like a trapped bird. You can walk again, she said. But it will hurt worse than anything you have felt. Meanwhile, in a luxury hotel restaurant across the city, Douglas Hale stood beside Victoria Ashford, both of them watching a wealthy investor sign documents that would bring them $500,000 in commissions. Victoria wore a dress that cost more than Valentina's entire apartment, her blonde hair swept into a style that required a weekly salon visit. Douglas wore the suit of a man who had learned to steal small amounts from 100 vulnerable people, enough to live well but not enough to be noticed. Or so he thought. Victoria lifted her champagne glass and smiled at Douglas, a smile like a knife. Douglas, I received a complaint about our staff presentation standards, she said loud enough for the investors to hear. She had seen Valentina serving that morning, bruises blooming across her neck and face. Instead of concern, Victoria saw only liability. This is why we maintain strict grooming codes. I do not want to see damaged goods presenting our 5-star experience. Keep her in the back. Douglas laughed and clenched his hand like he might grab Valentina's throat again, and neither of them knew that 3 blocks away, a man in a black coat had already made the decision that would end both their lives as they knew them. At 6 a.m. on day 7, Alessandro walked into the therapy room and stopped. Marco stood using parallel bars, his legs shaking like newborn foals, sweat pouring down his face. Valentina stood beside him, one arm supporting his waist, tears streaming down her face. Marco's leg moved. Then the other. One full step. Then another. The sound of his footsteps on the marble floor was the most beautiful sound either of them had ever heard. Alessandro's face cracked like stone breaking. Vinny and Theo, standing in the doorway, saw their boss's eyes fill with tears for the first time in the 15 years they had known him. In that moment, he was not a crime lord. He was just a father who had believed his son would never walk again, watching miracles happen on a marble floor at 6 in the morning. Day 10 arrived like a blade wrapped in ice. Valentina stood in the hotel parking garage at 11:24 p.m., her final shift completed, her paycheck, $847 after taxes, folded inside her coat pocket. Even with Alessandro's help, she still needed $8,000. 48 hours remained before the custody hearing. 48 hours before Ava would be taken. The fluorescent lights hummed above the concrete, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Her breath came in small clouds. The rain from earlier had left puddles that reflected her exhausted face like mirrors she did not want to see. Footsteps echoed. Heavy. Deliberate. Douglas Hale emerged from between 2 parked cars, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his tie loosened, his face twisted with something between fury and desperation. He had been waiting. Heard you've been missing shifts, he said, his voice low and measured in a way that made her stomach drop. Found yourself a sugar daddy. Valentina stepped backward. Her keys were in her hand but they felt like nothing, like a child's toy. Stay away from me, Douglas. Stay away. He laughed, a sound like gravel in a drain. You owe me everything, Valentina. Every dollar I paid you, you earned on your back as far as I'm concerned. That's the real economy of this place. You think you just clean rooms and serve drinks? No. You serve men. Men like me. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into the flesh above her elbow, twisting. The pain shot through her like lightning. You think you're done working for me? You think you walk out of here and start a new life? His breath smelled like whiskey and contempt. Time to make it official what you really are. He shoved her toward a black sedan parked 3 spaces away. Her feet skidded on the wet concrete. She twisted her body, pulling with everything she had left, and her arm slipped from his grip. She stumbled, falling hard, her hand scraping raw against the concrete, palms burning, skin torn open, blood mixing with rain and grime. Douglas advanced toward her. His shadow fell across her body. She saw his hand reaching down. Then, two black SUVs appeared at the garage entrance, moving with the precision of a blade. Doors opened. Vinny and Theo stepped out, both wearing long dark coats, both moving with the casual certainty of men who had never needed to hurry in their lives. They did not run. They did not shout. They simply walked toward Douglas Hale with the measured pace of men executing something predetermined. Douglas froze. His face drained of color. "Mr. Hale," Vinny said, his voice smooth as silk. "Mr. Ferraro requests your presence." Douglas's eyes darted toward the exit, toward the dark stairwell, toward anywhere but the two men now standing between him and escape. Theo shifted slightly. Not a move, just a shift. A subtle repositioning that made clear any forward motion would be met with something worse than words. "No," Douglas said, backing away. "No, you don't understand. I didn't do anything. She's lying. Whatever she told you." "We are not interested in her account," Vinny said. "We are interested in the account books. The ones in your office. The ones that document exactly how much you stole from exactly how many people. The ones that include photographs of the bruises on their necks. The ones that document the assault charges Victoria Ashford helped you cover up." Douglas ran. Theo caught him by the jacket, one hand, effortless, and held him suspended like a man holding a caught fish. Douglas thrashed and screamed, his voice echoing through the garage, bouncing off concrete and steel. They did not hurt him. They did not need to. They simply placed him in the SUV with the methodical care of men handling cargo, and the vehicle pulled away into the November night. Silence crashed down. Valentina sat on the cold concrete, her hands bleeding, her breath ragged, staring at the space where Douglas Hale had been. She could still hear his screams echoing in the garage like a ghost that refused to leave. She did not know that at that exact moment, Victoria Ashford was preparing for her morning staff meeting at the hotel, unaware that her name was appearing in federal warrants, that her text messages to Douglas, 847 of them, were being printed out in an FBI field office, that her world was seconds away from collapsing. Vinny returned alone. He helped Valentina to her feet with surprising gentleness, his large hand carefully supporting her elbow where Douglas had gripped her. He did not speak. He simply handed her a clean cloth from his pocket and watched as she cleaned the blood from her palms. "Mr. Ferraro would like you to go home," Vinny said finally. "Lock the door. Do not answer it. Not until you hear from him. Do you understand?" She nodded. She could not speak. "Your daughter is safe," he continued. "There is a woman and a man sitting in a car outside your apartment building. They will be there all night. They will be there tomorrow. And the night after that. They will be there for as long as you need them." He walked her to her car. He watched her drive away into the rain. The hotel lobby at 7:33 a.m. the next morning was crowded with morning guests checking out, new arrivals checking in, the constant rotation of people passing through the brass and marble doors. Valentina had come to collect her final paycheck, to turn in her access badge, to close this chapter of her life. Victoria Ashford saw her the moment she walked through the employee entrance. The hotel owner was standing near the front desk in a tailored cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Valentina's monthly rent, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile sharp as broken glass. She waited until Valentina was visible to the maximum number of guests, until phones were likely being held up, until the moment was ready to be documented and shared. "Valentina Morgan," Victoria called out, her voice carrying across the lobby. "Just the person I wanted to see." Valentina froze. Every guest turned. The click of phone cameras began, soft and insistent. Victoria walked toward her with the stride of a general surveying a conquered battlefield. "You are terminated. Effective immediately." And I will personally ensure that every establishment in this city, every restaurant, every hotel, every casino, every place that employs people who care about their reputation knows exactly what you are. Unstable. Unreliable. Potentially criminal. A woman who steals from her employers, lies to her colleagues, and uses her daughter as an excuse for her failures. She paused, letting the silence settle. You will never work in New York again, Victoria continued. Take your poverty and your bastard child and disappear. Go somewhere where people do not know how to check references. Somewhere where desperation matches desperation. That is the only place that will have you. Valentina opened her mouth. No sound came. The word she wanted to say, the truth about the stolen tips, the unpaid overtime, the bruises on her neck that had faded but never truly healed, none of those words seemed to matter in this moment, in this lobby, with every phone camera capturing her humiliation. She turned and walked out into the November rain. 3 blocks away, she found a bench near a shuttered restaurant. She sat. The rain soaked through her thin coat, dripping from her hair, running down her neck. She was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. The time on her phone read 8:15 a.m. The custody hearing was 40 hours away. She opened her wallet with shaking hands. Inside was the worn prayer card her grandmother had given her 17 years ago, the edges soft from years of handling, the ink faded until the words were barely legible. She had pulled it out dozens of times during the past 12 days, holding it like a talisman, like proof that someone once believed in her, once loved her, once thought she was worth saving. The rain blurred the words beyond recognition. She thought of Ava in school right now, in a classroom with children who had 2 parents and warm houses and mothers who picked them up on time. She thought of her daughter's face at the hearing when the judge explained that she would be living with her father's family, that her mother had failed to protect their home, that this was for her own good. Her finger hovered over her sister's contact in her phone. 1 call. 1 sentence. 1 admission that she was not strong enough, not capable enough, not worthy enough to be Ava's mother. But then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just 2 words, I walked. Below it, a video. She watched Marco Ferraro take his first unassisted steps on a marble floor, his legs shaking, his face twisted with effort and determination. She watched Alessandro stand in the background, his hand over his mouth, his shoulders shaking silently, this man who commanded armies and moved empires with a phone call, this man who had walked into her life and asked nothing but to be allowed to help. She watched Marco take 3 steps. Then 4. Valentina stared at the screen as rain dripped from her hair onto the glass. The water obscured Marco's face, then cleared again. If a boy who was told he would never walk again could take even 1 step, if a man who had stopped believing in mercy could find it in his heart to save a stranger, then she could do this. She could fight 1 more day. She stood. The rain was colder now, sharper, cutting. She did not wipe her face. She simply stood and walked. At 4:56 a.m., 12 men in black tactical gear moved like ghosts through Douglas Hale's suburban neighborhood. The houses were dark, the street silent except for the sound of an approaching convoy of unmarked vehicles. The FBI raid began at precisely 4:48 a.m. The front door of Douglas's split-level home exploded inward. Agents poured through like water through a broken dam. Flashbangs illuminated the darkness. Douglas Hale was dragged from his bed in cotton underwear, screaming, his arms flailing, his voice cracking with panic. I can pay. I have money. Please, please, I can pay. Agents moved through his home with the methodical precision of people who had rehearsed this moment 100 times. Boxes of evidence were carried out. Financial records. A laptop. Photographs of women with bruises. Text messages between Douglas and Victoria discussing which assault victim was becoming a problem and needed to be managed. The lead agent, a woman with gray eyes and a federal badge, read the charges in a voice without inflection. William Douglas Hale, you are under arrest for wage theft affecting 47 employees, totaling $890,000. Assault and battery. Sexual harassment. conspiracy to conceal evidence, racketeering. Douglas collapsed onto the front lawn in his underwear, his body trembling like a cornered animal, his hands zip-tied behind his back, his face wet with tears that came from panic, not remorse. News helicopters had already arrived. Cameras captured everything. By 6:53 a.m., the footage was streaming across every news outlet in the city. By 8 a.m., the story had expanded. Investigators were looking at the hotel's other managers. They were interviewing Douglas's victims. They were reviewing a decade of financial records. By 9 a.m., the name Victoria Ashford appeared in federal reports. By 10 a.m., her penthouse was being raided. She answered the door in silk pajamas, confident, expecting nothing. When she saw the warrant and the cameras, her face transformed into something unrecognizable. The perp walk happened at noon. Designer clothes. Cuffed hands. Her own daughter watching from the sidewalk, bewildered and ashamed, as her mother was escorted to a federal vehicle. The evidence was staggering. Text messages. Meeting notes. Financial transactions that proved Victoria had not simply known about Douglas's crimes but had actively facilitated them, had protected him in exchange for lower labor costs, had dismissed complaints from assault victims because they would have required paperwork and compensation. By evening, she was everywhere and nowhere. Every news anchor discussed her complicity. Her socialite friends disappeared. An investor pulled $40 million from her ventures. Her husband filed for divorce before midnight, taking the children, taking everything. By the next morning, Victoria Ashford was a pariah. Restaurants refused her. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. Her name became shorthand for corrupt privilege, for the way power protects power until it suddenly does not. The hotel released a public statement condemning her. Boards demanded her resignation. By the end of the week, she had lost every board position, every social connection, every vestige of the identity she had carefully constructed over 30 years. Douglas received 40 years without parole. Every asset seized. Forced to pay restitution he would never be able to afford. His name would follow him into a federal prison where he would spend the rest of his life. Victoria was not arrested, but something worse happened. She survived. She lived. And she lived as someone utterly destroyed, utterly exiled, forced to work retail in a neighborhood she once called disgusting, forced to live in a studio apartment that would have once seemed like a punishment, forced to watch everyone she knew pretend she had never existed. Justice came not through death but through something more devastating, through living with the weight of what you had done while the entire world watched. 1 year had passed since the rain stopped falling on that November highway. The physical therapy clinic occupied the ground floor of a renovated brownstone on the Upper West Side, its windows bright with morning light that seemed to chase away every shadow Valentina Morgan had ever known. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and along them hung photographs of patients, teenagers learning to walk again, an elderly woman standing without a cane, a young boy with cerebral palsy throwing a basketball toward a hoop his mother had installed in their living room. These were not before and after shots staged for marketing purposes. These were real people, real transformations, real lives that had been given back to them by a woman whose own life had been given back to her. Valentina stood behind the front desk, reviewing patient charts, her calloused hands now steady and certain. She wore simple clothing, a pale blue blouse, dark slacks, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her face carried the kind of peace that only comes from having survived something and emerged not broken but remade. The bruises on her throat had faded completely. The swelling in her eye had disappeared months ago. What remained was something subtler and more powerful, a woman who had learned that she was stronger than her circumstances. The clinic had been open for 8 months. Every piece of equipment, every square foot of space, had been funded by an anonymous donor whose identity Valentina had not confirmed but knew beyond doubt. The donation had appeared in her account 6 hours before her custody hearing, $22,000, then another $180,000 to build this place. The money had arrived with a single note attached, for Marco. And for her. She had not seen Alessandro since the day he brought Marco to her apartment, the boy's father sitting silently in her living room while she worked with his son's legs, teaching the muscles to remember how to move. That day, Alessandro had watched with an intensity that made the air feel charged, as if something dangerous was being held back by sheer force of will. Then he had left, and she had not seen him again, though his presence haunted the space like a ghost who would not depart. But that was before she understood the full extent of what had happened. The news had reached her slowly, pieced together from articles online and careful conversations with her daughter. Douglas Hale had been arrested in a federal raid at dawn, his home surrounded by agents while his family watched in horror. The case against him was devastating: a decade of wage theft, assault charges from 17 different women, documented proof that he had assaulted Valentina on multiple occasions and covered it up. His trial lasted 6 weeks. The sentencing was delivered on a Tuesday in a federal courthouse, 40 years without parole. The judge's voice was cold and precise. "You have systematically preyed on vulnerable women. You have stolen from them, assaulted them, and hidden behind your employer's complicity. Justice demands accountability." Victoria Ashford's exposure had been far more public and far more brutal. The FBI's investigation into Douglas had exposed a network of corruption that reached into the hotel's executive levels. Victoria had not merely known about his crimes, she had enabled them, had protected him in exchange for maintaining lower labor costs, had actively dismissed complaints from assault victims because filing reports would have required paperwork and potential compensation. The hotel's board moved with swift precision, announcing her immediate termination and launching an independent investigation. The news cycle had devoured her reputation whole. Every major outlet reported her complicity. Her photograph appeared on television screens across the city alongside headlines that read, "Hotel executive complicit in decade of abuse, privilege and predation, how corruption protects violence." Within 48 hours, investors began withdrawing funds from her ventures. Her husband, a corporate attorney who valued his own reputation far more than his marriage, filed for divorce before midnight, taking their 2 children and every asset he could legally claim. Victoria's closest friends disappeared, not returning calls, not acknowledging her existence. Restaurants she had frequented for 30 years turned her away. Boards demanded her resignation. She lost a $40 million partnership with a real estate developer. She lost her seat on 3 different charities. She lost her social standing, her identity, her entire existence as she had known it. By the end of the first week, Victoria Ashford was a pariah, not imprisoned, but imprisoned nonetheless in a different kind of cell made of isolation and shame. She had been forced to move to a studio apartment in a neighborhood she once called disgusting. She now worked retail in a discount department store, folding clothing for minimum wage, watching customers walk past her without recognition, which was perhaps the cruelest mercy of all, not to be remembered, not to be hated, simply to be invisible in the way she had rendered others invisible. Justice had not come through violence or revenge. Justice had come through truth. And truth, once released, moved like a blade through everything it touched. Valentina had read the articles without feeling much of anything at all. Douglas and Victoria existed in a past that no longer held power over her. They were consequences of a world she had already left behind. What mattered now was forward motion, was the clinic's opening, was Ava thriving in her new private school, was the absence of fear that used to accompany every morning. The bell above the clinic door chimed softly. A young man entered, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the careful deliberation of someone still learning to trust his own legs. Marco Ferraro was 17 years old now, his face no longer contorted with pain, his eyes bright with the kind of confidence that only came from recovering something you thought was lost forever. Behind him came Valentina's 4-year-old daughter, Ava, her hand clasped in Marco's, both of them laughing about something that had happened on the walk over. "Vivi!" Marco called out, using the childhood nickname he had given Valentina weeks ago. "Look who wanted to come with me to the clinic today." Valentina emerged from behind the desk, and Ava launched herself across the room with the unselfconscious joy of a child who had learned, finally, that safety was real. Valentina caught her, breathing in the scent of her daughter's shampoo, feeling the solid weight of her in her arms, this child who had nearly been taken away, this child who was now hers in a way that no creditor or court could ever dispute. Tell Vivi what you did, Ava demanded, tugging at Valentina's sleeve. Marco grinned and pulled a letter from his jacket pocket. The envelope bore the seal of Columbia University. Early acceptance. Athletic scholarship for physical therapy students with demonstrated community commitment. They said my application essay about recovery was unusually mature for a high school student. He paused. I didn't tell them that I learned what real recovery looked like by watching you. Valentina felt something tighten in her chest. You did this, Marco. All of this? I simply believed in you. You did more than that, Marco said quietly. You showed me that broken things could be put back together. That it wasn't weakness to need help. That sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone see your pain. They worked through the morning, Marco participating in an advanced physical therapy session, Ava drawing pictures in the waiting room with colored pencils, Valentina guiding a middle-aged woman through spinal mobility exercises. The woman, Sarah, had been hit by a car 8 months ago and told by 3 different doctors that she would never walk without assistance again. Now she moved with careful strength, and her eyes glistened with tears of disbelief at what her own body could accomplish. I don't know how to thank you, Sarah whispered, gripping Valentina's hand. Thank yourself, Valentina replied. I just provided the space. You did the work. At noon, Marco prepared to leave for his college preparation classes. Valentina walked him to the door, and he hugged her, a full, unself-conscious embrace that would have been impossible a year ago, when his damaged spine would have made physical contact painful. Alessandro's throwing a celebration party tonight, Marco said as he pulled away. Official reason is my college acceptance. Unofficial reason is your clinic's humanitarian award. He wants you to come. Valentina's hand stilled. I don't know if that's a good idea. Why not? Marco asked, genuine confusion crossing his face. Because I haven't seen him in a year and I don't understand why, Valentina thought. Because every time I think of him, something in my chest splits open like an old wound. Because I'm terrified of what it means that a man like that chose to help me, and I'm even more terrified of what it might mean if he stops. I'll be there, she heard herself say. Marco's face brightened. Good. 8 o'clock. The penthouse. Don't be late, Vinny made pasta, and you know how he gets if people don't show up on time for his cooking. After Marco left, Valentina returned to her desk and stared at the afternoon ahead of her, feeling the slow acceleration of her heartbeat, feeling something that had been dormant for months beginning to stir in the space behind her ribs. She had built something here, a clinic, a reputation, a life that was entirely her own. She had not needed Alessandro Ferraro to save her. But he had given her tools to save herself. And now, for the first time in a year, she would have to face him again and reconcile the debt she owed with the feelings she could no longer deny. The afternoon stretched out. Patients came and went. Valentina moved through each session with professional precision, but part of her attention remained fractured, divided between the present moment and the evening that was approaching with the inevitability of darkness falling. At 6 o'clock, she closed the clinic and returned home to change. Ava had been picked up by her best friend's mother, a custody arrangement that was now simple and joyful, completely free of the terror that had defined Valentina's life a year ago. She stood in front of her small closet and selected a simple black dress, elegant and understated, the kind of dress that suggested a woman who had moved beyond needing to impress anyone. She knew what she would find at the penthouse. She knew it would be full of Alessandro's people, men in expensive suits, the infrastructure of an empire that operated in the spaces between law and chaos. She knew that standing in that space would remind her of exactly how different their worlds were, how impossible any real connection between them might be. But she also knew that she had spent a year building herself into someone strong enough to stand in that space without breaking. And tonight, she would finally understand what Alessandro had been unable to say in all the months of silence that followed. The city lights were beginning to glow as she made her way uptown, the November evening cool but clear, free of rain. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.